Hi, everyone. Welcome to Music NFT Archive, where we document and discuss the history and growth of tokenized music. I'm your host, Tor, founder of Music NFT Archive, avid collector of music NFTs, and the artist behind Studio Nouveau, the moniker I began using to mint my own music in 2020. I've been obsessed with tokenized music ever since. Today, we are joined by Jonathan Mann, the prolific and Guinness World Record holding songwriter behind Song a Day. He has been writing a new song every day since January 1st, 2009. But he's also had a very long and interesting journey exploring the possibilities for tokenizing music on the blockchain. Jonathan, welcome to Music NFT Archive.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's very nice to speak with you.
Absolutely. So, can you tell us about your life and musical background pre Song a Day?
Oh yeah, sure. Um I always loved music, but I never had anyone in my family or I kind of like growing up, music being played was not around. And so I can remember sort of like as a kid, I didn't really even understand like how instruments worked. Like I remember there was a um talent show when I was 5 years old and I did um, Michael Jackson's "Bad." I like lip synced to Michael Jackson's "Bad," and I grabbed my crotch at the end of it um, as a little like 5 year old, and like it was very scandalous. But I can remember very specifically. I remember that some of my friends, like slightly older friends, did like a Bon Jovi thing, and they all were using like tennis rackets to like pretend to be guitars. And I remember thinking like, how do they know that it's guitars? Like I didn't even understand, like I had no conception of like what how music works. Like I had like zero conception. So I had no frame of reference at all growing up for like what being a musician could be or even playing an instrument is. Um and then around 12 years old, just sort of like the age where this kind of happens, the switch flipped in my brain and I sort of went from being like a kid to a tween or whatever, and I got like instantly, suddenly obsessed with Bob Dylan. Um, and Dylan, you know, his albums and his music had been around me my whole life, but like something, some magical thing happened in my brain where suddenly I was like hearing his music for the first time, his lyrics, and they like just, were blowing my mind. Um, and so at that age, I asked my dad for a guitar, for acoustic guitar, and he got it for me for Christmas slash Hanukkah that year. It was like 1994, I guess. And yeah, like literally from the moment I got the guitar, I started trying to write songs, and it became my sole focus and my sole sort of obsession from that moment, and has literally never stopped. Um, and Yeah, I wrote. I was always very prolific even as a kid. I just was just writing as many songs as I possibly could. Some of those even exist. I've thought about like someday maybe tokenizing even like these very very early like 12, 13, 14 year old just terrible, just like beautifully terrible now almost. Like I'm at the age now where I can like really appreciate how beautiful and bad it is. But
Yeah.
I had my guitar teacher, who I had very briefly, um, lent me his 4 track tape, like little cassette tape machine, and showed me how to use it. And it's funny too because actually at that age, I can remember in a similar way to where I didn't understand at all how instruments worked or music or like how one would play music. Well, at this point, I was playing guitar and I was developing an understanding of how to play chords, and I learned the pentatonic scale, and I did all the sort of things that you do when you're learning guitar. I learned how to play the melody from Fast Car, and I played Blowing in the Wind, and like, Come As You Are, da 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 da, and like all the things one would learn in 1994. But uh, but what's interesting looking back on that too is there's a similar kind of like gap in my understanding where you know um, an aspect of like production or like I would listen to these Dylan albums and I was starting to notice like how different the songs would sound from even on the same album. Like wow, this song, um, Subterranean Homesick Blues, like has a distinct kind of vibe to it, a sound to it, and then another song, Love Minus Zero No Limit, like has a different vibe to it, and like, but I didn't, I wasn't at the point there where I like could grasp or even understand that like what I was missing. It was like an it's like an unknown unknown. I didn't know that there was this idea of production. So I listened back to these like early recordings I did, and I was like trying to put bass down on something or like do a guitar solo, but I didn't understand anything about production. Um, so that came later, like then I went to college and I started learning about recording, and through the process of recording is just like how I learned about how production works and all the choices that we make and like so that started like the actual like real kind of deliberate recording of songs as a way of kind of writing them and recording them at the same time. They're sort of like intertwined. Probably started, I don't know, around like 2001 when I was at Bennington College. And all through college, still very prolific, writing a lot of songs, recording a lot of songs. Um, I mean, there's so many stories I could tell. I don't know how deep we want to go. I did Song Fight a lot, which is like a online song competition that's still running. That's been running since around 1999. Um,
Wow.
where it's just like an open invitation. Each week, there's a title. Everybody writes a song with that title. Everybody votes for which song they like the best. There's a winner. There's no prize. It's just for fun. And I did that for a couple years, almost every week. Um, and it's in a lot of ways like sort of a precursor to Song a Day. Um, I did a project in grad school after grad school called I did a project in grad school called the Mario Opera, where I wrote and performed a rock opera based on Super Mario Brothers. All the songs are sort of like contain the melodies and the chords of like the classic music, and um, that sort of led to a YouTube show that I did in like 2006 called Game Jew, which was
Right.
like I wrote 40 songs about the Nintendo Wii leading up to its release. Um, and I would sing these songs and I would like interview people about video games. And I actually ended up being like the first person on the West Coast to get a Wii. Um, and I was like, I got into the newspapers and stuff wearing my Mario overalls and like, anyway, all that was crazy. And then sort of around that time, like 2006, 7, 8, my sort of video game obsession started to wane a little bit.
Mm,
Um, and I had almost exclusively been writing songs about video games for like many years. Um,
right.
and and it was around that time that someone handed me a flyer for a thing called Fun a Day, which still happens. It's we're in the middle of it because it's January, and it's just every January. It's like an invitation to make one piece of art every day, and
Wow.
and someone handed me this flyer January of 2009, or maybe like December of 2008, and I was like, okay, that's what I'll do for January. I'll make a song a day, and um, yeah, so it's 2009. It's still really early in YouTube era. I started posting them all on YouTube. Um, my audience at that time was almost entirely nostalgic video game focused, and so it was kind of a big transition to do. And um, but that first month, like a couple songs went viral, and like it started going well, and I had nothing else sort of going on. and so that's how Song a Day that's how Song a Day was born.
That's so cool. And there's a couple of things I want to sort of like step back and touch on because um sort of like the you touched on the timeline of when you were doing certain things like, 1999, 2001, and it kind of struck me that you sort of came up really in the thick of this transition from like analog to digital, the
Oh yeah,
proliferation of like, online music. um w- would you maybe like is there anything to say about that in your journeys about sort of like starting out writing songs, learning about production as you sort of go into college, your college
yeah,
years?
yeah.
How did the sort of digital and
Oh,
.com revolution affect you during this time?
oh, absolutely. And I feel like in a lot of ways, my journey in NFT is very much a continuation of my interests in technology and how it affects music, but also just me particularly. I'm just like, oh, like what's how can I use this thing to to do cool things with my music? And so yeah, definitely, like when I was recording, like on the recording side, it's been such a journey. Like when I first got to Bennington College, they weren't using tape machines anymore, but they were using these machines called ADAT and DAT machines, which are like the ADAT was like these, like I think it was 16 or 32 channel. They looked like VHS tapes, and you would record all the instruments into with all the many different channels onto these big VHS looking tapes, and then you would do a mix down to the DAT tapes, which looked more like, I don't know if you remember, like mini DV tapes. That's what the DAT tapes looked like. And
Okay.
so you would like mix down to stereo on the DAT tapes, and then the DAT tapes is what you would use as sort of like your master that you would put onto whatever, you know. Um, I mean, at that time, right then, we didn't even have, like, burning CDs wasn't even an option. So it was mostly recording things to take to like directly the cassette. But then very quickly, right, like maybe by year two or year three of being at Bennington, nobody was using the ADAT, nobody was using the DATs. We were all just recording straight into. At that time, we were using this program called Digital Performer,
Yeah, yeah.
which seems sort of funny, but and then Pro Tools, um, and right around that time too, like maybe year two of me being in college is when CDRs came out, and it was like this was like a revelation. You mean we can put our music onto CDs? This is crazy. And so, I would all of us we would make our little albums, we would burn them to CDs, and then we would sit outside the cafeteria and like sell them to our friends. And like, and we made the art ourselves and Photoshop, like, it was, what a time to, like, it was all so amazing. And then a little and then I discovered Songfight. So Songfight was like an early example of sort of people organizing online to do sort of their own thing with music. And I also very distinctly remember from this time MP3.com, which was, what would be the analog? I guess sort of like SoundCloud. It was like pre-SoundCloud, where just
Oh,
anybody could
okay.
upload their MP3s to MP3.com, and there was a kind of curation for the front page that happened. And I remember I had one song on there that did really well, had like 40,000 listens or something, and people were like emailing me about it and stuff, and that was like crazy. That was like a revelation. Um, and then, like, just as we go forward, I mean, we could jump ahead a bunch, but like, you know, um, I I very distinctly remember specifically something like Bandcamp, because by the time Bandcamp came out in 2009, there were so many sites. There was MySpace, and MySpace was dying at that point, but MySpace had been the place to sort of put your music to like get people to hear it. But there were so many places where there was like Reverb Nation and like all these different things, and none of them were. any good, like in terms of a way to like sell your music. And I remember Jonathan Colton, if you've heard of him, he did a thing around that time called Song a Week, and he became really famous off of it. And he
Uh,
was a web developer, and he had made this website for himself that I was just beautiful. I was like, "Oh my god, look at how he's selling his music." People can put in their own price for what they want to pay, and it's very clean and very easy, and it looks beautiful. And then Bandcamp came out, and it was like anyone can do that, and I was like, "This is what I've been waiting for." And
uh,
so I uploaded um, all of the first year. It was like they came out the same year I started Song a Day. So I uploaded all the first year of Song a Day on there at the end of year one. And there's this really funny, nerdy story, which is the way that Bandcamp worked. I'm not sure if it still works this way, probably doesn't, but like you can choose to download it in what format you want. If you want to download the music you just bought, you can download it in FLAC or uncompressed WAV file. And what they do is when you say you want to download it, when someone downloads it for the first time, that's when the files get converted, right when the person downloads it. And I broke their servers because the first time somebody tried to download year one of Song a Day, they had not prepared for the use case of someone trying to convert and download 365 songs in one go. And I crashed their servers. Um,
wow.
and so yeah, that was the sort of progression. And then just watching SoundCloud happen and everything, like it was just like um it seems almost quaint now, like the pace of innovation and the how much things changed so quickly, um
Yeah.
it feels like things almost. And I mean, I guess that's what got me into crypto too. That, I mean, we'll jump ahead there, but like, you know then suddenly the exciting things on the internet to me were happening in crypto, where
Right.
where everything was more ossified in the web 2 space. People had won, everything had been figured out, you got this, you got that. And then crypto came along. I was like, "Oh, there's a whole other way to be thinking about this."
Right. And that's such great context. Can you, before we even get to crypto, can you just give us a sense of like in the first couple of years of Song a Day, what the Web 2 sort of life of Song a Day looked like? Like you had YouTube,
Yeah,
you had
yeah,
Bandcamp, it sounds like what how were you utilizing, were you using like Spotify or what were you
yeah,
doing?
yeah, definitely not Spotify.
Gotcha.
um I remember very specifically there was like every year, in February, there's an art show for everyone, in a given city who has done Fun a Day. So you've made your 31 pieces of art, and they throw like an art show for everyone to like put up their art and everyone to watch. 2010 in February, I have a very distinct memory before Spotify came to the US, where you paid a monthly subscription and you sort of got unlimited music. And I remember being like, no, I'm not interested in that because I want to like own my music. And like, I had put a lot of effort and time into like, burning my friends' CDs of like all the things that I wanted. And I had this iTunes library of like 100 gigs of songs that I coveted and that I loved and everything. And I remember sort of having this discussion with them, and they're like, no, man, streaming is the future. Like, you're not going to own the songs, you're going to just like pay a fee and you're going to have access to everything. I'm like, hey, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to be the way. That doesn't sound good to me. So definitely not Spotify. I mean, Spotify was like, um I think it was maybe 2012 or 2013, I think, that it finally sort of came to the US and started its long march to dominance. But no, I mean, at the time it was really just, yeah, I guess it was Bandcamp, YouTube. I mean, I had a Twitter, I had a Tumblr. I know that I had a thing like to automatically post them to Tumblr. Um, and I think those were the main avenues, I would
Yeah.
say. You know, the sort of the main place has always been YouTube, um, weirdly, but that's always been the main
Yeah,
focus.
and what about SoundCloud? You mentioned that. Did you ever use that or
I would say I feel like at various points I would like put songs that I particularly liked on SoundCloud. I like sort of use SoundCloud as a curation tool almost. That that's how I sort of remember using it. Is like, oh, SoundCloud seems like a place where I should put like what I consider to be, you know, the best song a day songs at a given point or whatever.
right? Yeah. So let's connect this with crypto a little bit. Can you tell us about how crypto first got on your radar?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so you know, I feel like a lot of people. Um, I I remember actually seeing sort of maybe not the white paper itself, but I remember hearing about Bitcoin all the way back in 2009, like right when you know, Bitcoin was first mined, I believe it's January 3rd, of 2009. So it was like right around the same time that I was starting Song a
Right.
Day, and I was I was deep, sort of into sort of the what seemed like the apocalyptic, um, prognostications about the financial crash. I was like very convinced, you know, in some ways still am convinced that like, you know, the reverberations of the 2008 financial crash, you know, you know, at that time seemed imminent that our entire economy was going to crash. And so I was sort of deep into like this territory that I'd never really cared about or explored before. I was reading like financial news and things, which was not really my interest or forte. But because of this sort of fear of this imminent collapse, I was very deep in it. And in that context is where, you know, I very clearly remember like seeing, oh, there's this, you know, there's Bitcoin and you mine it and people are doing it on their laptops. Like I have a very clear memory of that. And it didn't, you know, it didn't really like speak to me or sparked my interest at all. And then like the next time I remember, I have a like vivid memory of it coming back up on my radar. Are is like I was actually visiting YouTube, and a friend of mine, Justin, was there, and he was like, "Hey man, have you seen what Bitcoin's doing?" This was like 2013, and I was like, "No, like what's Bitcoin doing?" He's like, "It's $1,000. It's $1,000 of Bitcoin." I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." He's like, "Yeah, I put in like $600 and now it's," I'm like, "Wow, that's really cool, man. That's great." And you know, again, it was like, "Cool, great, okay, cool, sweet." But what does that have to do with me? That doesn't seem interesting at all. And so then it wasn't until 2017, that yeah, I think I've told this story a lot, but like I'll tell it again. I went to a conference in northern Ontario at a it was like at a summer camp, in the fall. It was beautiful. It was just like northern Canada, like the colors, and like we were on a lake, and like I saw, Ethan Buckman of, Cosmos. He's one of the founders of Cosmos. Uh, um, Speaking, and he gave a great talk, a very sort of like basic talk about how Bitcoin works. And he sang a song. He like borrowed my guitarlele that I had, and he sang a song called Scam Train, like Scam Train, like singing about, at that time, he was talking about ICOs, um, and all the scams that were happening. And, you know, it's the same story like throughout crypto's history. But he gave this really great talk about Bitcoin, just in a very accessible way, explaining how it worked. And what happened in my mind in that moment was, seeing him give this talk. Here was a guy who clearly was not like a financial bro, and was like, you know, an artist and interested in music and stuff, and was like, had his own chain, and like was doing this cool stuff, and like something about it. And the other thing that happened in my brain was like, I was like, proof of work, and the way he described it, I was like, oh, that's song a day. Like song a day is proof of work. Like I have this whole like chain of songs that as a proof of work. Like and that was like the sort of like thing that was happening in my brain. And
Yeah.
then afterwards, I started talking to him, and I was like, is there any way like what about like music and the blockchain and like he's like, yeah, man, like there's cool shit happening and like da 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 and like NFTs were not a thing. Like it's not a word. It's not an acronym we had yet. But like I got home from that conference and I tweeted like, I'm interested in the blockchain now. Can someone tell me what's going on? And my friend Boris, who I'd also met at this conference, was like, yeah, let's chat. He sent me my first Ethereum. Like he had me set up MetaMask. He sent me my first Ethereum, and he said like, here's some things to like play around with, and and that was sort of my entry point. And it was right around this time, like there was just there was just a bunch of us who were sort of all happened to be turned on and thinking at the same time. And so yeah, there was Jason from Art Gnome and like the Dada people and CryptoPunks. And when Boris showed me CryptoPunks, it was like I fully got it. I was like, aha, okay, this speaks to me in a way that like no other crypto thing I've seen does, and that was it for me. And I wrote to the Matt and John from Larva Labs, and like I had lunch with them, and like was like, hey, will you help me? You know, will you help me do for Song a Day what you did with CryptoPunks? They're like, no, but they were very encouraging, and we sort of became friends, and we were going to all the same meetups, and like they weren't famous. They were famous to me. Like I was in awe of what they'd created, but they were just two guys that were part of this community. And that was true for years. That was true from 2017 to like early 2021. There was really just a small group of people. Certainly in those early days in New York, there was maybe 30 of us. Total in New York, who were going to these meetups and just like talking about things, and people were building apps, and like everybody was just so excited about the possibilities of it.
Yeah. Well, Larva Labs missed opportunity there. You could have
Yeah,
you,
exactly,
you
exactly.
could have jump started Song a Day, right? Or, on chain right there. Um,
Well, what's hilarious is I do regret like there's like so many things. Just even going back to like the music stuff, there's so many things that like I don't understand at the time completely. And one of the things that I didn't understand right away was like about what like the timestamps and the provenance of like time would mean.
right.
And I I was so obsessed with doing it once, like only, and actually you and I have talked about this a little bit of like what is the value of only ever tokenizing something once in one place at one time only, and having that be
Right.
it, like that is the thing. Which at that time I was very much a maxi on that front. But there was these guys who had this website which is no longer around called Rare, not to be confused with Super Rare. Um, and I had met with them, and they were saying, yeah, let's just put your songs up. Like let's just take a handful of your songs, and we'll just mint them, and we'll put them up. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it that way. I want to have the full project to do it all, and I had a vision for it. But in some ways, I regret like how cool would it have been to like I think I still wouldn't have beat Skrilla, because Skrilla's always first on every music NFT metric. Uh, but it would have been quite a bit earlier than what I actually ended up doing the first one. So in some ways, I do regret that. Um, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned that Boris helped you set up your first wallet and everything. Is that your artist wallet that you still use today?
That's the very same. Yeah, yeah. September of 2017. It's still the same wallet that's done basically everything having to do with Song a Day. I bought my punk with it. I bought my first NFT that I bought actually was a crypto kitty, um, when that first came out, and yeah,
Yeah. And it's yeah, that's so funny because I saw that date when I was kind of looking at your wallet and I was like, "Oh, that's like when I was literally buying my first crypto ever and going fully down the rabbit hole myself." And I was in New York at that
yeah,
time as well. So who knows? We were probably
we could have yeah,
passing ships and
totally,
but
exactly,
is there
yeah,
anything to say about your early experience actually owning NFTs like CryptoKitties? It's funny. I also could have gotten. I think I went to try out CryptoKitties, but I think it
yeah,
was like
yeah.
very late, and I kind of was like, "This is way too expensive for me." So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, spending $87 for a CryptoPunk seemed,
right,
extravagant, It seemed, in a world where I'm living, job to job, every single sort of conference that I do at that time, I was making a living, like, doing songs at conferences, like, you know, it's not like we have unlimited money, and $87 is not a lot of money, but it seemed so frivolous. It was like, what am I, it seemed like, well, like, what am I doing? But you know, like would I spend $87 on a baseball card? Would I spend $87 on a rare toy? Like probably
right,
not. That's just not like something that I do. But I mean, I loved CryptoPunk so much, and it just was like, I just loved it so much. I wanted one, and of course now I'm like, that was dumb. Like I should have bought, 100 of them or something. Um, but at the time it was like, and even for years it was like, CryptoPunks were not. People forget, like, and it's easy to not remember this period of time, and it all blends together. But CryptoPunks were not popular. They were not at all what they became for many years.
right. And it's I even for myself, I have always respected what CryptoPunks represented, but I was around in the at least I went down the
Yeah,
NFT rabbit hole in 2020, and I didn't really have any desire to get a CryptoPunk, and I'm being honest. I was
right.
more into art,
Yeah, totally.
like what was going on in Super Rare and other things. So it's people really take for granted how we sort of accept that an NFT can be sold for millions of dollars. But like you said, I think it's important to double click on how it just felt like uh I don't really, why would I spend $87? And
Yeah,
so when you is that what you paid for your CryptoPunk?
yeah,
And when
yep.
did you get that?
I guess that was probably, you can look on chain. I think it was like February of
Okay.
2018. It's like a couple months after I had gone, after I was fully entrenched in this burgeoning community. And I was like, okay, I think I have to like pull the trigger and buy a CryptoPunk now. I should have done it before, but like, I have to do that now. So I remember, I think I just bought, I didn't even like look for one that looked like Mirror. I just bought the cheapest one. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna buy. Here's the cheapest one I can find. I'm just gonna just gonna buy it.
Yeah.
And then I wrote a song, and then I wrote a song about him. Of course, I wrote a song. Actually, oh, this is funny. I'm forgetting this. So the first I bought a CryptoKitty. Do you remember like when 4156, Punk, who we know online as Punk
Yeah, yeah.
4156, he bought his ape, and he sort of made this huge purchase, and it was like he was gonna he's gonna sort of use the branding of the ape to make the ape more valuable.
Right.
Like the ape was already valuable, but he knew he could like increase the value of the ape by making the ape almost its own character. So when I bought my CryptoKitty, um, the whole idea that I had, 14193 is the CryptoKitty. I bought this CryptoKitty thinking, oh, I'll start writing songs as this CryptoKitty, and I'll try to make this NFT, which has basically no value because CryptoKitties, there's so many of them, and I'll try to make this valuable just by layering on this layer of like making it, make songs and stuff. And I sort of lost interest in that very quickly. But I believe, if I'm not wrong, that kitty is still on sale for 125 ETH. That's never changed. I set that up in like 2017, and I was like, and it's just still sitting there waiting for someone to buy it for
That's
125
so
ETH.
funny. And that must be a Gen Zero, right? CryptoKitty.
Gen Zero or like very early.
I think
Yes, it's
that would
something
be
like
within
that.
that. If I could be wrong, but were there any other like crypto themed songs that you wrote in Song a Day before this point, or like you wrote the CryptoPunk
Well, let's see.
song,
So,
right? Was
yeah,
that
that was the very first one. That was like the very first. I mean, I think if you look, it was probably like I discovered it on like a Thursday, and like on Tuesday, I wrote the song. And the song was really meant to, so that I could send the song to Larva Labs and have them invite me to lunch. Like that was my purpose of writing the
oh.
song. The song was to like ingratiate myself to Larva Labs. I mean, also because I love CryptoPunks and and I wanted to make them a song, but it was like, yeah, here I made you this. Can we be friends? Like, it's like the kind of vibe. Yeah, but then I ended up, I wrote a song about the CryptoKitty, and then I wrote one for my punk when I got him, and I wrote one for Dada when they came on the scene, and yeah, there's probably many more that I'm forgetting, and there's probably even more from of ones of like platforms that don't exist anymore, and things like that, like things even that went by the
Yeah.
wayside.
And you don't think there was ever one like in the years before that where you were like, oh, Bitcoin went to 1,000 or something? Like, would you have done that?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably not. If anything, I could look. If anything, there would be a song that's just you know, like anti crypto at that point. It would be just like crypto's dumb, like, finance bros, that kind of a
Gotcha.
thing.
Interesting.
Probably. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, I figured I want to quickly touch on digitally rare. That was a podcast that you started, right? Was that around this time?
Yes. Yes, that was right around that time. Yeah. There were a few people early on whose like writings I found just so helpful and clarifying for like understanding and thinking about digital scarcity and the possibility of putting art on the blockchain and what that could mean. And Jason Bailey from Art Gnome, uh, right click save as, was one of them, and the other one was Matt Condon, who was writing just articles on Medium at the time. And I approached Matt about like, hey, we should do a podcast just about just about NFTs. And actually, right when we started the podcast, it was like I think June of 2018. It was our first episode, and what's amazing about this podcast, actually, if you listen to it now, is it's kind of a really wild time capsule of NFTs and like their birth, um, because in that very first episode, we talk about the term NFT because it had sort of just been coined as like maybe this is the thing that we're going to be calling it. And the very first episode of our podcast is called like NFT or Nifty, like whether we were going to call them Nifties or NFTs. And like this was an actual debate that was happening in a small subsection of like crypto Twitter of those of us who cared.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, like you can hear the whole sort of progression of this world in these episodes that ran from like yeah, from like they ran for about like a year and a half before we stopped in late 2019 we stopped, and then we picked it back up right as things were heating up around late 2020, like December of 2020. I think we came back, and it's really fun to hear those episodes where those first episodes where we came back, and I'm just sort of taking Matt through like, here's all the stuff we've missed like for like the year or so that we weren't making episodes. Like, look at all this stuff. Look at all this stuff that's happened. You
Yeah.
know, and it seemed like because Beeple, this was pre major Beeple sale, but Beeple had had like his first sale, and and so that was clearly this indication that like this thing that a lot of us had kind of not given up on, but just like been a little bit worried was actually never going to happen as like a thing.
Yeah.
That was the first sign where it's like, oh, okay, oh, could it actually be happening now? Like, is it possible? I feel like crypto is full of those stories. I hear from people, like post 2013 crash, right? Where it's like, well, it went to 1,000 and now it's not anymore. Like, we're not really sure it's ever going to go back up or if anyone's ever going to care about crypto again. And now we sort of know after all these years that like, oh no, this stuff is kind of cyclical. And but pre NFTs blowing up, it was very much a question. Like there it was we we debated endlessly like what's it going to take for people to care about NFTs? Are people ever going to care about NFTs? Or are we just kind of like, are we banging our heads up against the wall for no reason?
Yeah. Yeah, that's I love that. And it's to me, my big takeaway from, I've always been interested in looking back and studying sort of all this history, but my constant takeaway is that um at every step of the way, you're always better off sort of being like looking into the future and being like, what do I want to make happen in the future?
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I should have bought Bitcoin, I should have bought punks, but it's like that never really is
Yeah.
helpful. And it's sort of like,
No,
what is
no,
that
not at
thing
all.
now?
Well, and what's crazy is the thing that I've always found over and over and over in crypto, and maybe in life too, actually, is just like, actually, yeah, I have the saying for myself that's always rang true, which is like my schemes always fail where my whims kind of succeed.
Right.
Like the more I scheme and like and it's hard to define exactly what a scheme is, but like a whim is seeing CryptoPunks and just having a feeling. If a thing, if you see something and it gives you a feeling, that's the sign,
Yeah.
instead of thinking about it as like, oh, how can I maximize and how can I do this and like how can I blah, 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 blah. It's like you see a thing, you have a feeling, and the feeling is the sign. And then like whether or not it works out, like I would be I know a lot of people who bought punks, especially early on, or especially who claim them, would be just as happy owning the punks at any price just because we like them,
Right.
we love them, they're like a it's an added bonus that it's worth so much. um and so that's been true like every single time, anytime like I've been lucky enough to have something become very valuable in crypto, it's always just been because I had a feeling, I had a whim. I was like, "Oh, that's cool. I like that. I'm excited by that. Let me follow that path." You know?
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. Um, and so, it's interesting you put this timestamp of the Digitally Rare podcast at like you said, like June 2018. And
Yeah.
so on May 31st, 2018, you minted an NFT called Game Jew's Banjo Cartwheel, which is
Oh yeah.
that's token 134 on the super rare V1 contract. And I just want to set
Right.
the stage here for this. So the description reads, from 2006 to 2008, I made a show on YouTube called Game Jew. I sang songs about games, interviewed people about games, and generally ran around in a pair of red overalls without a shirt, making a big fuss about games. This GIF is from episode 4. I drew on it and made the GIF in Photoshop here in 2018. Was this the very first NFT you minted?
Yes, that exactly is right. That's the very first NFT I ever
Yeah,
minted. Yeah.
it's really cool. And so how did you get connected with Super Rare?
I met Super Rare at the very first meetup that I ever went to, in probably January or February of 2018. In January, they had the first Rare AF conference, um, and I had food poisoning that day, and I was so fucking bummed to miss it because you know everyone that I knew was there, but I had watched in first in just in replies on Twitter and then in DMs, like I had watched the whole thing come together. And that became sort of a watershed moment in the first era of NFTs. Like the Homer Pepe sold for like $40,000 and like people it got news coverage and people were talking about NFTs and Skrilla was there and like everybody was there and I managed to miss it because I had food poisoning. But a couple months after that, or maybe like a month after that, Dada threw a meetup. And this was the very first meetup that I was able to go to. It takes a lot to get me to leave the house, frankly. I'm very much a homebody, but this is the kind of thing where I was so obsessed. I was like happy to go to this meetup. And at this meetup, I met all the Dada folks, and I have like the clearest memory of all of like meeting the Johns from Super Rare and um, and I remember them describing it to me as like it's like Instagram but tokenized, and we're gonna go to this conference and we airdropping people some stuff. And I was like, I didn't know what airdropping was, and I was like, okay, that sounds cool. That sounds cool. But yeah, we just met and we became friends just from that that was the first of many 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 sort of meetups and talks and things that we would all go to around the city. And yeah, and then they finally sort of launched their platform, and I guess it was Robbie Barrett, right, that had the very first
Yeah, yep, the
tokens
AI
on there,
generated nude portrait uh, works.
which was like that was and then Jason Bailey was the first one to mint it. He was the one that bought it, like the very first
Right.
sale. um Yeah, and then I guess around that time I was just like, oh, I really want to mint an NFT. Like, but as I was saying before, I don't want to do my songs because I want them to be canonical and I want them all to be. I was I put so much effort and time into thinking about like how am I going to mint these? What chain am I going to be on? What if I pick the wrong chain? Like at that time, I was so obsessively thinking about this
Yeah.
stuff. So it couldn't be a song. But I was like, what would be like a fun thing to do? I was like, oh, I'll take like a. I don't really know how I thought of this, but I was like, I guess I was just like, I'll take a frame, a couple frames from GameJew. I'll like draw on it in Photoshop and mint that. And didn't somebody like I think it sat unsold for many years, and someone ended up buying it at some point, right?
Um,
Like
I think
later
you're
on,
right
yeah,
about that. I was looking at it yesterday, but I don't have it in front of me. But I think you're right. Yeah.
yeah. I think like years later, someone was like, "Oh, this is funny. This is a pretty early token. Well, I guess I'll just buy this one." Yeah,
Yeah. And so a little sidebar, like, did you ever meet like Rare Skrilla? You mentioned that you like could have, but did you actually meet
yeah.
him at
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. We also, he was at a lot of these meetups, and so we just became and Joe Looney and like that whole sort of like slightly earlier crew that had been building on Bitcoin for so long, since mid 2016, or better than I do, I guess. But like, yeah, they had already been on this whole art on the blockchain. In fact, once again, Skrilla had an earlier podcast than me. Like, I can't say that I had the earliest podcast about um, NFTs because technically his podcast with Cynthia Gayton, Art on the Blockchain, was the first because they started quite a bit earlier than
right,
we did.
right. Well, along those lines, like, was there anyone else you were aware of, like, thinking and talking about music on the blockchain, or was it just Skrilla, or Um, do you remember anybody else thinking this way?
Gorilla is the one that comes to mind the most. And then there was oh god, I'm blanking on her name, and I
I think of Tatiana Moroz, I think. She was doing like an artist token earlier on, but I'm not sure who you're thinking of.
can you still hear me? Did I
Oh,
yeah.
I got you now. Yep.
Okay, good. Yes, Tatiana is exactly who I'm thinking of. I met her again at like a conference. Um and so yeah, it was like her, and she wasn't really doing NFTs, but she had been so early as a musician to sort of using this technology. I want to say like 2012, right? Or something like that. It's like just ridiculously early. Um,
Yeah, I think it was 13, but yeah, she was yeah, thinking about this artist token
I
concept
mean,
very early.
so early.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so those two were sort of the main, I would say, that jump out in my brain. It's like there's crypto, there's like the world, right? And then there's crypto, and then there's people who are interested in NFTs, and then there's people who are interested in music NFTs. And it's so
Yeah.
tiny. There's like such a, and even certainly crypto people, but even people in NFTs wrapping the mind around a music NFT, even for the people in NFTs at that time, was difficult. Was like there was just some leap about music that like makes it so hard, because it's partly because of the rights issue, right? People are like, so I get the like every
Yeah.
time, no matter who, the first question is, so I get the rights to the
Yeah,
song?
yeah.
Like, well, no, rights are like, but like they never asked that about Pepe. You buy a Pepe NFT, they're like, so I own the rights to Pepe now? I was
Yeah,
like, they wouldn't ever ask
exactly,
that.
yeah.
So it was like, meeting Skrilla especially, and seeing what he had been doing for so long in the Pepe community, and then his. I remember when I think I no, I think it's before my time. I remember him showing me probably um, smoke a
Yeah.
Bitcoin, which I think which to me, I don't know. You have your whole list. Like to me, that is in some ways like canonically to me like the first, you know, the first tokenized, the first like properly tokenized um, song on the blockchain. Um, and so having someone to talk to who like fully gets it was like pretty exciting.
100%. And, yeah, I would say, like, Smoke Up Bitcoin is very interesting because it was, like, maybe I would say the first, like, comprehensive song release using, like, different, uh, methods of, blockchain tech and stuff like that, but he also had, he started out with DJ Pepe, but he also had the Gorilla Glue
Right.
mixtape, which was an interesting concept,
Oh,
and that's a real
right.
musical, you know, kind of sort of like an album,
Yeah,
and he had this token
for
for
sure.
it. So we talk about that on the episode that I did with him,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's all great details. Um, what about like Ujo Music? Do you remember that? Was that on your
Oh
radar?
yeah. Oh yes. Of course. Of course. Of course. Of course. Yes. Ujo music. Yes. Of course. And I remember thinking about Ujo music. I was like, I think they're doing it wrong. I remember thinking like they're missing they're missing the part of the blockchain that is interesting, which is tokenizing the song, which is like making the songs collectible as individual objects. And I remember the closest thing they had was like at some point they added, I forget what they were, pins or
Badges.
something. They were like badges. And I remember thinking, you're doing it wrong." Like I even think I wrote to them and I was like, "You're so close." Like was it Simon or someone I wrote to? I don't know. And I was like, it's not quite right. Um, like it was. I felt like it was when like the internet first was a thing, people thought a website would just be like, or people thought like a newspaper website would just be like, let's just scan the newspaper and put it up on the website. Like
Right.
it was too skeuomorphic. It was like we'll just make Bandcamp, but we'll put it. on the blockchain. It's like, but that's not people don't want to. Nobody wants to pay. There's just nothing new there, you know. So I remember it, and I was so fascinated by what they were trying to do. But I was like, yeah, this is not. It's not the right. It's not the thing that makes. Well, it certainly was not the thing that made me excited, right? It's like it's not the thing that I thought was the actually new thing
Yeah,
here.
and that's so interesting. And before Ujo did the artist badges, they actually did two tokens in mid 2017, mid to late 2017 with RAC. They did a
RAC,
token
yeah,
for his Ego album. And so I
right.
think those are interesting. I talk about it in the episode that I did with Ujo. Um, and we break so it is so interesting to hear your how you were thinking in that moment. Um,
But it was a token, right? It was like a coin, right? Or was it just a
Yeah,
token?
it is. It was a fungible. I mean, I actually have one.
Fungible
Yeah,
token, yeah,
there was
yeah,
two album, but they were like the album token. So it's sort of
right,
similar to like the Gorilla Glue mixtape token. So
right,
I do think it's like
right,
an interesting early example. But I remember that
yeah,
too. I actually made an account on Ujo back around that time when they had the artist badges, and I kind of kick myself for not like collecting one just because I just think it's kind
yeah,
of cool. But um, so anyway,
yeah.
that's super interesting. Uh, so we'll come back to super rare, but I also want to say, like, I kind of looked at the timeline here, and so you minted your first NFT, and let's see, on July 29th, 2018, you tweeted from the Digitally Rare Twitter account, I'm approaching 10 years of writing song a day. I'm working on being one of the first musicians to make my songs available as one of one NFT digital collectibles. Be among the first to add a song to your NFT collection by donating to my initial song offering.
Yeah, I always forget about this, but yeah, that's so ICOs were such a big thing. Still at the time, although I think they were sort of starting to wane. But ICOs, and I think they're going to make a comeback. They were a way for tokens to launch and for platforms to be built, on the back of people buying the token ahead of time in the hopes that the thing will be built. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. It's like a funding mechanism. Like, so I'm having a really hard time getting anyone to care about one of one song a day idea that I have. And so maybe I'll see if this will work. So yeah, I made the website in like Squarespace, and it was like, send me some ETH and you can like pre-buy a song on out of my catalog, and then like once the thing is made, that song will be yours, was sort of the idea. um and then I had like tiers where it was like I would also, you could request a song and I would make a song for you personally or for your business, because that was another way I was making a living at the time. And only one person did it. One person was the only person to buy the initial song offering. I think he did it. He had me write a song like for his girlfriend's birthday or something, like a personal song. But it turned out to be like years later. It turned out that the person who bought it was the founder of, oh, what was it, Niftex, one of
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
um, one of the fractionalization platforms. Which actually last year had like a problem where there was like an ape that had been fractionalized, and then the platform died, and then someone was able to somehow buy the ape for like very cheap because there was some thing in the code or something. And when everyone was getting mad at this guy, everyone was getting mad at, I think it was called Niftex, I
I
forget
think
what it was
that's
called.
right.
uh and everyone was getting mad at him, and I was like, why does that name sound so familiar? And then I went back and I looked. It's like, he is the guy that bought the the initial song offering. He's the only person. But I will say he paid like I don't know, 3 grand or something to get a song, and I used that money to like hire an artist who was like the first artist, and I had the artist like do the kind of generative renditions. I had this, the whole idea that I had of like each song would have a trait that would be, all the traits are there, and the traits exist as visual aspects in this thing. And I hired this artist that I found on like Dribble or something. Yeah. So yeah, that was an early attempt at the process.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. And so is the timeline of everything you just described basically like that summer 2018 or
Yes, that sounds
yeah, I
exactly
think
right.
you're
Yeah. So if you think like I discovered CryptoPunks in like September of 2017, and then buy the CryptoPunk in like February, go to doing all these meetups. I'm like trying to find people to help me make this thing, and then yeah, by summer of 2018, I'm thick in like finding any way I can to like get some funding to hire a developer to do this
yeah,
for me. Because there was no tooling. There was no way I wasn't going to do this without paying a developer, you know, tens of thousands of dollars at
right.
least.
And so the next interesting notch on the timeline is October 31st, 2018, where you minted
Yeah,
two tokens for your song BUIDL on Super Rare. The
yeah.
description reads, "This is the very first Song a Day song to exist on the Ethereum blockchain. I performed it live on stage at DevCon, the largest gathering of Ethereum developers in the world. My backup singers include Vitalik Buterin, who created Ethereum, and Aya Miyaguchi, executive director of the Ethereum Foundation." Um, until the past year or two from now, like the present, the super rare page for these tokens featured the YouTube video of the performance of this song at DevCon. But the video is not actually in the token metadata, though, correct?
Correct. Much to my consternation and
Yeah,
chagrin. Yeah.
and this was always to me so fascinating because I unearthed
Yeah.
these tokens
Yeah.
long, long ago and was like, wow, what is this?
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
so instead, now Super Rare displays the cover art for the song, one of which features a cartoon of you playing guitar inside a big Ethereum logo, which is carved into a giant pumpkin. And because it was October 31st, and there's the second token has an alternate version of the image that includes what I assume are cartoon versions of Vitalik and Aya Miyaguchi, it seems like.
Yeah. And it's like I actually don't remember one of those. I guess the first one must be a test in getting into blockchain stuff. I did not understand even being so deep in it for a year, it just takes me a long time to grok things, I guess. And so, like, I didn't understand about metadata. I had had it explained to me like many times, and I had had hashing explained to me many times, but like, I didn't understand it fully. And I really regret it. I regret not being able to fully sort of vocalize to the super rare guys who were helping me with this in Prague. Like we were doing it, I was like in their Airbnb with them. We were like huddled around a computer to get this to happen. Like to explain to them, oh no, 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 like here's how the metadata should look. Like we need this, we need that, da, da, da. Like which I could do obviously now. At the time, I didn't. Yeah, I just didn't understand it. I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, we're tokenizing it. Cool, cool, cool."
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, to me,
so
these tokens are very special, and to me, it's like regardless, you
yeah,
express this intention pretty clearly
yeah,
in the
yeah,
metadata.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
And so, can you just give us the story behind these tokens? Like, well, you kind of did. You just did
Yeah,
just now. But
definitely.
is there anything else to
Well,
say?
well, no, yeah, I can give you sort of the background, which is Matt Condon, my co-host on the Digital Rare podcast, threw a really great NFT conference, probably the best one that I ever went to in San Francisco called the NFT Summit. It was just a great. It was at the time. That was probably also in the summer of 2018. Um, and it was just the speakers were so well curated. Everyone was a good speaker. And at the end of the day, I did my song as I always would do at these conferences, and I had everyone singing along. And I even got Aya Miyaguchi, the now to everybody somehow evil, infamous, to me, warm, wonderful, amazing leader of the Ethereum Foundation,
Yeah.
to sing along with me, and just by like I don't know, it was shocking to me, but like suddenly I'm talking to her afterwards, and she's like, "Oh my god, I love what you do with the songs and stuff. Like, um, we're having DevCon in a few months. Like, would you consider like coming to DevCon and doing a song at DevCon?" I was like, "Oh my god, I would love to. That would be so wonderful." And and then over the months we were like, and this was in Prague in like 2018. So like over the months we were talking about like, oh, what could this look like and what would it be? And I was like, I was like, well, is Vitalik going to be there? And she's like, yeah, and she knows Vitalik really well. I was like, would Vitalik be interested in like, you know, participating in the song? And she's like, probably. And so, I got there, and like I started putting together this song about like the timeline of Ethereum upgrades at that point. And like the song was about all the things that the Ethereum core devs had tried that didn't work. And so the song just features me listing out a bunch of like failed attempts at upgrading Ethereum, and then after each failed attempt, Vitalik goes, "That didn't work." And then I say another one, and he goes, "That didn't work." And then I say another one, and he goes, "That didn't work." And it's just delightful. And like all performances that I've done at these kind of big ETH things, like it got equal amounts of like people loving it, and then like people are like, "This is the most cringe thing in the whole world. I can't believe oh, ETH is so dumb. I hate ETH. Everyone hates ETH. ETH is awful." Uh, um, story never changes. But I knew, I was like, okay, I'm going to DevCon. I'm doing a song on stage with Vitalik. Surely, surely this deserves, even though someday I'll have to like mint another version of this when I do my full project. Surely this deserves to be an NFT like today. And again, nobody at that conference knew about NFTs, or if they did, didn't care, or if they did care, it was more of a curiosity than an actual like excitement.
Right.
Um, and it sold for, I think, well, you can tell me, but I think it sold for like 2.5 ETH, which was like $500 at the time. And I was like, okay, cool. It's like two, and I'm pretty sure like that 2.5 ETH like lasted me, once things started kicking off in like 2021. That 2.5 ETH like went a long way in like all the collecting that I did in those early days of like the real boom. Um, yeah.
Yeah. It's just the coolest story ever. And I love that. I love everything about that. And one thing I'm wondering is we'll get into this properly later, but like you have your we'll jump ahead to your current contract for Song a Day where you have all your official songs now, but like for songs like BUIDL, did you add a new one for the current contract, or does it only exist as this super rare token, or what did you do for that for this song?
No, so yeah, over throughout then like especially early 2021 too, there's a whole sort of host of songs that essentially exist as dual one of ones. And I know we've talked about this like, of like of the yeah, of just the philosophical framework of that kind of tokenization. But so essentially, what I did when I minted all the songs on sort of what is the, canonical official Song a Day contract, which I finally was able to get made in 2021. Um, when I minted all those, I had, or when people minted those, I had set aside all of the songs that had already been minted, so they could not have been gotten through just the randomness of minting them. And once they were minted, uh, I sent them, I like individually sent them to the people who owned the originals.
Oh, I see.
And so the people who bought the original, so the person who bought, who owned that original Biddle song, I sent also the canonical sad contract Biddle song.
Gotcha. That's a great way to do it, I think. Yeah, that's cool. Um, and so one thing I also want to point out is that, it's such a the way you described the conference and how like most people didn't know about NFTs or care about NFTs, let alone crypto art.
Yeah,
When I think about people who, even musicians today, who say like music NFTs failed because this, or it's like
yeah,
there was a time, like, as you're pointing out, that, like, no one even accepted crypto art for what it was, and
no,
I remember
no,
that, and so it's sort of
yeah,
like, all it takes, in my mind, is just the right catalyst, and so
yeah,
that's partially why I wanna tell these stories about people like yourself, to show people this, to show people that, it's not there until you meme it into existence, and if you say it fails before the starting gate, then, it's not the starting gate anymore. We've certainly passed the starting gate, but, I just wanted to, like, double click on that
no.
idea.
But I mean, a lot of us in late 2019 were already starting to feel like, okay, this may have failed. Like the idea of NFTs may have failed at this point.
Right.
You know, that's how a lot. And I actually have this podcast of um, at the second ever Rare AF in 2019, um, where we were interviewing people and we asked everybody for their spiciest takes, and so many of the spicy takes on NFTs. And again, this is a room full of 100 people who are in summer of 2019, who are like the most devoted NFT art people in the world, and all of our spicy takes were: Is this going to happen? Are we delusional? That was like the main spicy take, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And then a year and a half, later, all it took was people, you know.
right. And to me, it is the most important context for people to take away in their minds, in my opinion. And it's sort of this is exactly where I was hoping to go next, is sort of this sort of transitional period. So you wind down the podcast, everyone is feeling kind of down on NFTs, and then I remember this time, and then Beeple sort of makes a big splash. Is there anything else to say about this period, or were you sort of just what was Song a Day looking like in like late 2019 through 2020?
Yeah, I was like, this was when I was sort of at the height of my career doing conferences. So I was doing like one or two conferences a month, I would say, all through 2019 and right up until the pandemic.
Gotcha.
So yeah, and so it was really like, I, in the back of my mind, crypto was still there, and I was still thinking about it. But yeah, we sort of stopped doing the podcast. I stopped paying super close attention to it. Um, I did the thing, I did, where it was like, and it wasn't even for me like a bear market thing. I didn't know at that time, even really, like, because I'd come in not in a speculative way. The price of crypto was not something that was affecting me at all. It was more of just like, wow, people really, really don't seem to care about this at all. And I'm not sure how to make the thing that I want to make, and I'm not sure how to like sustain interest in this. So yeah, I would say like yeah, like late 2019 to late 2020, I was pretty checked out. So I missed the birth of like of what you were doing. I missed the birth of like art blocks, um, all of that I missed. Oh, was a Avastars. I missed that. Like
Uh-huh.
all these cool projects that people were still believing in and doing. I didn't know any of those people actually. I didn't know them. They all kind of came out of the punks chat, and I was not really in the punks chat. Um,
Uh-huh.
I all of my stuff was so in person, um, and so yeah, so I was pretty checked out in that time actually.
Gotcha. And well, I say that we call the next era of music NFTs the believing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, 100%.
but anyway, so let's like so 2021 January 1st. Like, let me just lay some details out here, on-chain details. Um, on January 1st, 2021, you minted Song a Day #1, the first song a
Yeah,
day
yeah,
on
yeah,
Rarible. On
yeah,
January 2nd, you minted Song a Day 2 on Super Rare.
yeah.
Then, between January 3rd and 10th, you minted Song a Day 3 through 10 on OpenSea shared storefront contract
Oh
using,
yeah.
and you used the collection title Song a DAO. Um, on January 11th, you began minting new Song a Days on this same contract, breaking the pattern from early Song a Days. This was a song congratulating Beeple on reaching 5,000 days of
Oh
creating.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, as you were deciding on how to mint your songs in early 2021, what were you thinking about? Like, how were you deciding where to mint between Rarible, OpenSea, Super Rare, or anywhere else? Can you give us a little insight to how you were thinking at this point?
I think coming back and seeing all of the stuff that had developed since I had sort of checked out, I think in a lot of ways I was just kind of like experimenting. I had had the thought that like, and you can see that in the first 10 songs. I was like, okay, what if I just start minting these like one by one starting on January 1st? And it was like very quickly I was like, okay, that's dumb. I don't want to do that. Um, and then and then I think um, and boy, if I had known too how dumb the shared contract thing was too, I probably wouldn't have I wouldn't have even done that either. Uh, um, just because it's such a pain in the ass down the road. But yeah, I mean, then what has just sort of happened is like, okay, well, there's so much happening in the NFT space that I'm so interested in now that just naturally, I'm always just writing songs about things that I'm interested in. So naturally, I started to write a lot of songs that I knew would sort of appeal to anybody who's the least bit interested in NFT. So I was like, okay, well, I have to start minting these. Maybe this could just be how it happens, and I can just like, get a little following here and like and make some money and be able to like build the thing that I actually want to build. I think that was kind of that was the that was probably the thinking there.
Totally, yeah, which makes total sense for the time. I remember that time, and there was so much going on. And so you titled the OpenSea collection "Song a DAO." Like, so did you have like a DAO concept in your mind at that
I
point?
think actually that is a later addition. So I think at the time I don't think it was called Songadao. I think
Oh, you could edit it. Okay.
I edited it later to call it Songadao because now on that page are a ton of Songade songs that were minted. Yeah, I mean, well, we can get to the thing, but like, then a little later on, I minted the whole first year of Song a Day at once, which sold out at point one. I made like 36 ETH or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and that was, and but those songs now, there's a way in my current contract, in like the canonical Song a Day contract, we have a function in that contract where you basically like you feed it your OpenSea version of a song, either it's like year one and year two exist in this format. And on our current contract, you can you call a function that burns that token and mints the canonical version to your wallet. You
Right.
burn the OpenSea version and it mints the, but it's like a lot of people bought those songs and just haven't done that yet. So there's a bunch of early Song a Day songs that like sit in limbo basically, where they exist on this OpenSea shared storefront, waiting to be minted on the official contract.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. That's interesting. I mean, I remember converting mine over, and that was you did it really well. Um, Backing up a little bit, so in the first half of 2021, you were minting occasional songs on Super Rare. So were these sort of like your hand-picked ones for that you thought would resonate with doing it in that way, or what was your
Yeah,
thought
that
process?
that sounds right. I think like the songs about the punk sales and the weird autoglyph shit that was happening. Like, wasn't there one about someone who burned an autoglyph? Like all that kind of stuff. Like I wrote songs about, and that seemed like um it seemed like super rare worthy. I guess you know what I mean. Like it seemed like okay, this stuff belongs in a sort of more hoity-toity situation.
Certainly. um, one funny thing that happened. So you made a video remix song, which you minted on February 10th, 2021, of Mark Cuban called
Yeah.
"Mark His Words." What do you remember about this?
Yeah. So, oh wow. Yeah. So, God, what was it? It was Red Lion Eye, who had his magazine that he had been doing, um, which is really cool. It was like you could mint an NFT of the magazine every month or whatever. Mark Cuban was getting into crypto, into NFTs, and had made a thing where you could do like a cameo type thing with Mark Cuban. You send Mark Cuban some crypto, he'll say, the thing that you send him to say. So Red Lion I made this poem about CryptoPunks and had Mark Cuban read out the poem through this cameo type thing. And I saw that and I was like, oh, okay, great. I'll remix. It's a perfect, it has a cadence, it rhymes, like easy thing to remix. So I remixed Mark Cuban saying this, and um, he like retweeted it, and then he was in my DMs, and we were like chatting, and he was like, "Let's sell it as an NFT." I was like, "Okay, great idea. You're my Cuban. Let's do this." And so I remember, and it like totally, just like it totally failed. Like I think we made, I think we tried to, I don't remember what it was. I think we tried to sell like, um, was it unlimited? I don't remember what it was. It was sort of like an open edition. I remember it being 0.02 ETH, I think, was the cost. And I think we only sold, I don't know how many we sold, but we did not sell as many as I had hoped. I had assumed that this was going to be the moment. I was like, okay, this is it. Where I'm getting crypto rich. I'm going to be able to fund the creation of my song. And I think this is it. We're doing it. Um, yeah. So there exists out there, like essentially just a ton of these editions of this like Mark Cuban CryptoPunk song. Um, and yeah, I don't even know they're on the rare they're on some rareable shared contract. Yeah, I don't even know what to do with that. It's just sort of is there. Such a weird like little moment.
Well, it's
Oh, but his company later on hired me to write a song, some kind of song about the Mavericks, about something as a result of this. Like his Yeah, I don't remember, but it's very not up my alley. I was like, okay, a song about the Mavericks. Okay, that's
yeah.
not my forte.
And the interest, so you said Rarible. It looks like it's a individual contract of in some way. It's not like there's the one that I own of Mark His Words is token number 3, and it looks like maybe
Oh,
you burned 1 and 2, but the contract name is Punks, Mavericks, and Michigaz. If
Oh, okay. So it must have been. It's probably then an 1155 contract then
it
that I
is,
guess you could have at that time you could make your own 1155 contract on Rarible with its own ticker and its own name and everything.
yeah,
So yeah, okay. Well, that's a little better then, right? So that it's its own self-contained thing.
yeah. So
I do remember burning a bunch. I do remember Red Lion was always like so opinionated. He was like he's Greek and he had this kind of like Greek like opinionated attitude about things. I love that. And but he's always like I always felt like he was so angry at me. Like he's like, you must burn them now. You know, it's like you got it. He was like he was this is all fucked up now. It was like yeah, and he was actually the only one who got mad at me when I minted. I don't know if he was actually mad at me or if this is just how he talks, but like when I minted all the songs on the sad contract and I had like these doubles of the songs and he had bought some of my one of ones, he was like, why did you do that? You know, like you messed it all up. I was like, oh man, he's very mad at me. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, yeah. We've talked about this. I would never get to that point.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
um, but anyway, so great context. So from here, like mid-February, it looks like you were preparing for the next iteration of Song a Day NFTs. On February 14th, it looks like you started uploading more songs to the OpenSea Song a DAO contract.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so then it was March 15th, 2021, when you did the first official
yeah.
release of the year one songs from Song a Day.
Good.
Is there anything to say about how you were preparing for this and what you were
Yeah.
thinking about leading up to
When
that?
when was Beeple's drop? Because I feel like I couldn't have had a better timing on that. Like March 15th of 2021 was like the perfect time to launch an NFT thing where like just just the we were reaching like the one of the first crescendos of like people's interest, you know.
Yeah.
There was a group so funny thinking about these people because I haven't thought about them in years. I guess I got connected with them maybe through Redline and I. It was a guy called Satman. I don't even know if he's still around.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
Satman, and like he's just a dude, and he had a really active Discord that and he had like a designer named Velk and this other lady who were like helping him community manage, and he had a really active Discord, and he was like, okay, I'm gonna help you launch, your thing. Just frankly, like my wife is always telling me this is very true. Just like I kind of need like operations and business people. Like if I had money to spend, that's probably what I would spend it on. It's like people
Uh,
that do the stuff that I'm just really terrible at. And so that's sort of like what they did for me on that first launch. They were sort of my team, my operations team, and they we were doing Discord hangouts and like it was March of 2021. It was like crazy. It was just like everyone was so excited. It's all happening, and it sold out instantly, um which was just amazing. It's such an amazing feeling. um
if I
and I
recall, like I participated in this, and I think you could just go and buy any of the songs, right?
Yeah, yeah, because we didn't have a way to do a randomness. I think because it was all there on OpenSea, and OpenSea didn't really have like it was very by today's standards very primitive, and they were just all there, and you just you pick the one that you want, you download it, if no one else, and you buy it. If no one else has bought it, then it's yours.
Yeah,
Um,
it was funny thinking about like I remember being like, all right, well, which ones am I gonna get? And so
yeah,
it
yeah.
was just like it was very fun. I fondly remember
Uh,
that moment.
that makes me think of something, which is um, it was uh at the time it seemed incredible to me that the tooling had gotten to the point where I could do this with no code and could just do it on OpenSea. That seemed at the time kind of a revelatory.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh wait, I don't have to wait until um, I can find a developer. Like I can just do this now, like this. Of course, and of course, not really totally understanding the full implications of it at the time. Again, not understanding things, but at the time, it was like, wow, oh, I can do this now. Like here, I can put all the traits. Like, if I have the art ready and I had to face, this artist do the art, and like it's great.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like okay, like we're getting somewhere now.
Yeah, and say what we will about ultimately the OpenSea storefront contract. It undoubtedly was so good for onboarding people. I know I personally onboarded multiple artists to use that contract. Um,
Yeah.
so it undoubtedly onboarded a ton of people to the NFT space. Um, so it was a successful drop. Do you remember anything else about the reception of it at that point? Did it just seem like it went really well?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like people were just so responsive, and um, then it was like my first ever real experience with dealing with like having a floor price and things were below the floor price, and it was like, oh my god, what a pain. But it just like ultimately was like, okay, this is what I've been dreaming about for all these years, and it's finally sort of like the first taste of it happening.
Right. I think a lot of artists were reckoning with this sort of like newfound collector base sort of.
Yeah, yeah. This mindset, this financialized mindset is like, yeah, whoa, oh my god.
Yeah, it was such an interesting time. Um, so moving ahead a little bit, so May 27th was when you launched the year two Song a Days on the same contract.
Yeah.
Can you give us some context about that time and that release?
Yeah. So by that time, like Satman's um little world had been changing, and I don't know exactly what happened, but we weren't doing it together anymore. And kind of tried to recreate it a little bit myself, and then um yeah, like the second that second drop did not go as well as the first one. Um, I think we maybe sold 50 on the first day, and then it was a long, slow drip of people buying them. Um, I feel like all the way up through like late 2021, like it was just like the rest of the year. Um, and so at that point I was like, okay, so like the ebbs and flows of this NFT market, and like I can't just like release a year every couple months and have it go gangbusters, unless like the first years are going to like shoot up in price, which of course they never did. And so yeah, so then that was the end of that kind of way of thinking about it. That was May.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's right, that was May. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that explains then sort of why you didn't release any further years after that, because it was sort of until the official, one, which we'll get to. But
Yeah.
I kind of was wondering sort of like about what was going on with that timeline, because I was there, but I kind of couldn't quite remember. Was there a
Yeah.
year three or
No,
Yeah,
no, no. Once year 2 didn't sell out the way year 1 did, I was like, "Okay, it's clear that this is not gonna be the right way."
yeah, and I definitely remember buying from that second one as well. But I definitely also was probably like, I'm probably running out of money, or I don't remember, but.
Yeah, 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 exactly. It's like we're by that time, we're all like the market had definitely cool that was like, March was a high, and I'm pretty sure like May was like one of the more the less active periods.
Yeah, and it's funny, it's all within that period of 2021. A lot of people probably assume that it was like must have been a straight through like
Yeah.
euphoria that whole year, but there really were like it was a roller coaster ride, I would
It
probably
was a
say.
total roller coaster, yeah.
And it came back. It came back in for different ways, but so I just want to point out that in terms of your minting songs and super rare, the last one that you appear to have minted on the super rare shared contract was on July 29th, 2021, and that was Super Fizz and the failed Stoner Cat transaction.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Superfist spent like 88 ETH on like a failed 80 ETH in gas on like a failed transaction. For a stoner cat. Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Wonderful. Just the best. I just what a good time that was. Just so fun.
yeah, and I just want to point that out to people that, for anyone who doesn't know, like there's so many songs that you've written and continue to write that just illuminate these important moments or just like interesting things that happen. There's just a treasure trove of just fun and good history in your songs. So I just want to point that out. Um, Moving ahead a little bit. So August 26th, 2021,
Yeah.
you minted "This Song Will Never Die."
Yeah.
You also tweeted that day, "Today is the day. Today I am deploying the very first ever on-chain song as an NFT."
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you remember about this?
Yeah. Well, from all the way back once Larva Labs did the autoglyph, I had been, that got me interested in the difference of like what we meant on chain versus not on chain. And I was like, oh wow, is there ever going to be a way to actually put music on chain? And um, I forget exactly where I saw this, but people have found now a bunch of different ways, of course, of doing it. And there had been in 2021, there had been a whole explosion of on-chain music of various kinds, starting with like unigrids and of course, Deaf Beef and like all of the kind of generative types of music. But I was like, okay, like I was like, how do I put a song, like an act, like one of my songs, like actually on chain to exist there, in the same way that like, and this to me is like, there's different flavors of on chain, there's different like levels to it. Part what makes for me autoglyphs so beautiful and so special and so unique in a lot of ways among the on-chain artwork is the total lack of dependencies needed to recreate them. Like literally, as long as the chain exists, like nothing else that we have in the world, not Java, not Python, not not browsers, not renderers. We don't need any of that. Like as long as like the chain exists and we have a way to read it, you can recreate the autoglyphs by hand if you want to, just
Yeah.
purely by looking at the symbols. Like that to me is kind of remarkable, and how beautiful they are and how varied and just everything about them is just like so special. And so, you know, I came across this musical language that's like kind of dead now. I forget what it's called. Did I mention what it's called in the tweet? Um,
I don't think so.
it has a it has a name, but it's this type of musical language, and it's a type of writing out music um, that you can just write out lyrics and melody um, in just plain text with no, you don't need like to write a staff and have all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, oh, like this to me could, it kind of felt like an analog to an autoglyph in the way that like literally as long as the chain exists um and you have some way to read it, someone who could who knows this language could um could recreate the song 1,000 years from now, um, with no other dependencies, just looking at it and deciphering the how the like the way we read hieroglyphs or something, like deciphering how the melody goes based on the language of this music. Um, and so yeah, so that to me was like a an exciting little little way of doing my own kind of on-chain thing that was like not didn't require contract, didn't require special code or um or any kind of like development space. Just as like, here's the song, here's how it goes, it's plain text, anybody can read it, and I put it on chain.
Yeah, yeah. And eh, I have some of these tokens, and so is that the current state of it today? It's just out there and it's fractionalized. Maybe it's worth saying that that's how you did the release ultimately as a fractionalized NFT, right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I remember I went like in a lot of different directions, and I was like, it just sort of makes sense to make this into something that like many people can just own little pieces of this thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's the state of it. It's like, I've done so many of these like little experiments, like little things that are just out there.
Yeah,
At some point I need to make a page, that exists that just has all of these different things. That's probably something I should be doing.
me too. Yeah, I think about that
Yeah.
every week.
Yeah. 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 Totally.
And so you're on this wavelength during this time of thinking about like on chain and fast forward to like October 21st, you release a song on arpeggi.io called
Uh,
What the Fuck?
yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, you want to tell us about this one?
Yeah. Going back though, really quick, there's something very important that happened that August,
Oh, okay.
which is not music based, that I made with Matt Condon and my friend Chris. We made a PFP project called the Fucking Trolls,
Oh, that's right.
and riding the absolute wave of PFP projects that existed. We even in August of 2021 felt like we were pretty late, in the cycle of PFPs. It was like there had been this absolute explosion, and the Fucking Trolls specifically were about sort of lampooning the whole self-important kind of bullshit, um like stuff around PFPs of like, like we're gonna change the world, we're gonna be bigger than Disney, here's our roadmap, like, all this stuff like
Don't
that
talk to
just
me if you
seemed.
don't, if your PFP
Yeah,
is not worth 100 grand or whatever.
I mean, literally, yeah, exactly. So we made Fucking Trolls as like specifically to lampoon this. um I came up with the idea of like nobody had made a PFP that was a circle that took up the entire circle of a Twitter, avatar, of a Twitter
Uh,
picture. And I was like, this is a very, to me, is like a very obvious thing to do, where it's like always this little character living inside the circle. Why don't we take up the entire circle? And at one point we were thinking about donuts, um, and then we came up with the idea of trolls as these faces looking at you. um, and this sold out, and we each made about like 300 or $400,000, um, and that money is the money that I used to pay for the development of the actual song a day. So August
uh,
2021 is when I made the money to hire Raid Guild to build the website and the contracts for Song a Day.
wow, that's such important context. Thank you for double clicking on that. That's really I didn't realize that either. That's so interesting.
Yeah, definitely. That's like wouldn't have happened without the fucking trolls, probably.
Yeah, yeah, wow. So you did ultimately go on to this arpeggi tangent. Do you want
Yes.
to describe that?
Yeah, I loved Arpeggi. I loved the whole idea of Arpeggi. They had, I think, what I still don't totally understand, but it seemed like a very unique way of getting sounds on chain. In fact, the thing that Skrilla is working on now on ordinals, in some ways really reminds me of that Arpeggi thing. Basically, we're going to put all these samples, these small samples on chain, and then you can, make your own song, using all these samples. And I actually even remember that Skrilla, um, was one of the first people to have his samples on the Arpeggi thingy.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so I think what I did, which I often did in those days, which is like there's so much going on that I kind of just um, combined like two things that were happening. So one was Arpeggi was happening, and then the other was that a horrible company called Hit Piece, or Hit whatever, Hit something. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Like what Hit, where they they like try to tokenize everybody's music, but like without permission. They like,
Oh, I do remember that. Yeah, that's right.
I think they were called hit something, hit whatever. Anyway, so the song is on arpeggi, but it's called what the fuck hit piece or whatever they're called. Like that was the song. It was about this company that
Oh,
had been, yeah, yeah,
gotcha.
um,
I do remember that now. Yeah,
yeah.
it'd be kind of funny if it was called Hit Piece, but it was.
What was it? Yeah, it was something like that. It was very funny. But yeah, luckily they fell by the wayside, and but the song lives on the blockchain.
Yeah, and you can still go press play on on OpenSea at least. Um, so that's like late October, and from then I have to assume that you're working on the complete full official song a day release, which happened on December 31st, 2021. Is that right, or was there anything else that I'm forgetting during this time?
I mean, my memory, which is always faulty, but that sounds right. That sounds correct.
Okay.
And that time was yeah, definitely like very filled with like trying to prepare for this release and like lots of dead ends of like figuring out how to do it and like it was it's obvious in hindsight of like how to do it, but like at the time it was like there's so many choices to make and like yeah.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Um, so can you just tell us, like, how did this play out? Leading up to this big drop, which was it was a big drop, right? I mean, it was certainly four song a day.
It was a
Can you just tell us how? Give us the lead up to it.
Yeah, I mean it was such a kind of the culmination of such a long, at that time 4 or 5 year process of like trying to make it happen. And finally, thanks to the fucking trolls and the money we made off the fucking trolls, I was able to hire these developers at Raid Guild who are wonderful to work with. I don't know if they're still doing stuff, but I assume maybe they are. Um, they made the contract, they made the website. Um, yeah, and then it was mint day, and um, it was really funny because I was sitting there watching, how many tokens we had sold, and it was going pretty slowly in the beginning for about half an hour. I mean, it was going, but like not, it wasn't like super fast. And I had like DM'd everybody, like just everybody that I knew in the space. I was like, it's live, it's live, it's live. Um, trying to get the word out, and a lot of people were sharing, and it was like really great. And Pranksy writes to me and it's like, I just bought 100 of them. And again, these were at point 0.2 ETH. So he spent a lot of money. Like, I just bought 100 of them. And he's like, that should get the degens going or something like that, because they all like watch his wallet or whatever to see what he's minting.
uh,
And then instantly, like it just sold out instantly. It was like without that Pranksy push, probably would have been more of a long slog, which is what I was sort of prepared for based on how year two had sold. Like year one had done well, and then year two had been such a slog in May. So I was kind of prepared for like not everything going right at once. And I
yeah,
was just in shock. I was just in shock that it happened. Yeah, that it happened so quickly.
yeah. I mean, I remember that too. I definitely was in there, and it was a very exciting moment. So, this was this year one to the present at that time, or how did you structure this drop?
Yeah. So the entire idea behind doing it on the 31st was that I could I could sell year one through the end of, I guess it was 15 at the time, or 14 uh in that drop, and then get to the point which is what I was trying to get to all along, which is where then I'm caught up to the present, and on January 1st I started minting on that contract every day. And so it had to happen on that day so that so that, you know, in my mind at least, like there could be a clean kind of like year thing where, the all previous years had been minted and 2021 or 2022 could start me minting every single day.
Gotcha, gotcha. That's so cool. And so since then, you have been minting a song on this contract every day, right?
Yeah, we're over 1,000 days on chain of minting a song every single day. Yeah.
And what's really cool as well is that you do it all from your own personal website. I think is it songaday.world? Is that the
Songaday.world, and I even have the devs had built for me this toolkit, this uh, back end front end for me that like links into the contract which is like what I use every day to mint. So it's and in fact, it's been improved over the years by my own dev that I have now, Alan. Shout out Alan. And and then lately, I've been working on the toolkit myself. I've been like making improvements based like just using AI coding. I'm able to like streamline my process and make it even easier. So I have a very streamlined, great, easy way of minting now, which is like just made my life a lot easier.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I was going to ask too, like, is there anything to say about how this process has evolved? Like, early in your earliest mints on this contract, was it much more arduous, or like, is there anything noteworthy to say about the process, how it's evolved, or
Yeah, I mean the process depends on how you define arduous, but like it's in it up until these recent changes that I've made, it actually was like quite a few steps, right? It was like write the song, record the song, make the video, put the video on YouTube, fill out my spreadsheet with all the traits, put the YouTube link in the spreadsheet, put the spreadsheet into my backend, which turns it into metadata, um, upload the image, upload the song, upload the video, upload the attributes. Those all get uploaded to IPFS. They all are turned into like the final metadata. Take that final metadata hash and mint it. And like that was sort of the process for a long time.
yeah,
But now I have all of that kind of happens in one go. So like now all I do is I fill out my spreadsheet, I paste my spreadsheet into the back end, I upload the song, and then the script does the rest. The script does everything. It uploads it to YouTube, it uploads it to Twitter, it uploads everything to IPFS, and it just gives me the metadata hash to mint. It's like much cleaner.
yeah, that is so cool. And I think it's important for musicians sort of looking at how things can be done in this space. It's to definitely, you know, I hope that they're aware of what you're doing here with this. And something you just walking through that, you reminded me of something I think is important to point out that all the traits for each song, like that was directly inspired by CryptoPunks, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things that I keyed in on early on with CryptoPunks was this sense that like there's such similarity between Song a Day and CryptoPunks, where CryptoPunks, is this large collection of things that are different but the same, and they all have these traits. And I was like, that's exactly like Song a Day. Like, what if I started to think about Song a Day uh, at, in that way of like, what is the topic? What is the location? What are the instruments? What's the mood? What's the genre? All of these things, the BPM, like all of these things go into the traits of a Song a Day song, and that all that exists not only for the ones that I've been minting daily, but that entire back catalog exists. And I've actually also been working on a project lately using AI to help me code. I don't know if you've seen like the galleries that this company called Shazoo is making. If you've seen like the Shazoo CryptoPunks gallery or the Shazoo Squiggles gallery, um, they're just like the best marketplace slash gallery for
PFP style, or even just like, song a day style projects that I've seen. It's like a beautiful way to look at the project as a whole, and then also be able to drill down on individual things. And
Yeah.
so, in addition to working on like all the other stuff that I'm working on, like one of the things that I've been trying to do is make a like inspired by them, make a gallery that you can really get a sense of Song a Day and be able to like see some of these different things in a different way. That's like it's hard to imagine or take in the totality of Song a Day, and like this what they've created with this kind of gallery that they have is very cool. It uses the same tech that Google Maps uses. It's
Oh.
a this is very nerdy, but it's called Open Sea Dragon, which is a Python library for yeah, that just like makes it so you can like have these tiles that load very quickly at different levels, and it's like you can zoom way in, and it's just great. So if you get a chance, yeah, look at shazoo.xyz and like look at the galleries that they have, and you can see like why it's such a good way of visualizing large collections.
Yeah, and this is, to me, it's so important to talk about this because, I think for a lot of people, they think about like, well, why should I mint my music as an NFT? And for a lot of people, for a while, it's been like, well, to sell it, right? Like that's why I'm doing
Hmm.
this. But you know, I feel like people like you are really a great example of why what you're doing, what you've done is you've put all of your work on chain, you've tokenized it, and that's a primitive upon which you can build so many things.
Right.
And so it's like you don't even have to talk about selling it before you just, you have the provenance of each song established with all the traits, even if you didn't mint it, when you originally wrote the song. And so there's so much utility in that basic idea of tokenization. So I just want to highlight that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's something that is so unexplored still in our world, in our crypto world, is the interoperability. It's so underexplored and underutilized, and I feel like it's just sort of waiting for people um, to really take advantage of like how interoperable it can be.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And so, just kind of walking through a couple last details here. Something I wanted to highlight was on September 9th, 2022, you released your 5,000th song a day. And
Mhm.
you really went all out on this song. Do you want to just tell us about that song?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I always try to do something very big for my thousandth songs, or usually actually, it's there's been ones that I haven't. Like I think 3,000 I didn't do anything for, but and it's possible that actually 6,000 I might not actually have anything, but we'll see. Which is very soon, by the way. It's like we're 6 months away from 6,000, which is just like it's bonkers to me that it's already happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for 5,000, I often go back on Spotify and listen back through previous Song a Day songs, and I try to find ones that like would be cool to redo. And so I was just doing that one day, and I came to that song, um, "Hustle and Grind," which actually, funny enough, here's a funny tidbit. That song was written in response to something uh, uh, Koopa Cooper Turley Koopa Troopa tweeted
Sure.
about like you gotta hustle, you gotta grind, like you gotta be up every day, like grinding it out. If you're not gonna win, if or whatever, like one of those classic Koopa tweets. And that song was like written in response to that. Like I was like, oh man, fuck that shit. And um so I listened back to that song. I was like, oh, I really like this song. There's something here that's really resonating with me, both musically and thematically and lyrically. And so, yeah, I put the call out, and I got I don't know how many people. It was like this felt like 100 people of like people playing on it, singing on it. I had a bunch of guest spots of people Domino and God, who else was there? So many people.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm blanking on everybody that was. Iman Europe was on there, and uh, so many people
So many people.
were brought such like elevated the song to something that like I never could have possibly imagined, and I really am just so proud of how that came out. Um, yeah, so I wanted to do something very special for that day, and I think it worked out.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's great. And so you mentioned Spotify now. So are all song a days on Spotify now, or
They are, yeah, like probably since like 2016 or around. I every month I upload the previous month's worth of songs to all streaming platforms
yeah,
via DistroKid.
gotcha. Yeah, I do that as well for Studio Nouveau. What is your kind of like, we talked about the early thought process. How are you thinking about things now?
Yeah, I mean about Spotify specifically or just.
Just sort of like the how you're interacting with Web 2, maybe.
Oh yeah, I mean um I feel like it's so fractured now in a way that it wasn't for a while. That um it's kind of we're I feels like a bit that we're in a transition period because once Musk bought Twitter and everybody, it used to be that Twitter was like one of my main places and like everybody that I wanted to interact with was on Twitter, and now so many people that I want to interact with are on Mastodon, and so many people that I want to interact are on Blue Sky. Some people are only on Facebook, believe it or not. And it feels so fractured. So, kind of the way I do it now is everything's still on YouTube. That's like YouTube is very canonical in that way.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, everything is also on IPFS. Everything is also, tokenized. Um, Everything every day does go on Twitter just because that's one of my larger audiences. I've recently made it so like in my toolkit, it automatically uploads it to Blue Sky just because that was relatively easy.
Hmm.
I would like to do Warpcast. I guess that's not Web 2, but I would like to make a Warpcast frame where you can just bid on the song right in Warpcast. That's a little bit more difficult. I haven't been able to get the AI to do exactly what I want it to do. Um, uh, but then occasionally there'll be a song, like the more political songs or whatever that I also upload to like Instagram, which then goes to Facebook and also TikTok. Um, but those are sort of more few and far between.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, at least my quick thought about it is sort of like, I feel like there's people who say like you shouldn't release your music on Spotify, but for me it's sort of like I would take the opposite take of like it is so unimportant to me that
Yeah.
it's just sort of like if it helped, my music is so weird and niche that it's
Yeah.
like
Right.
if people want to listen to it there, like why not? I'll just give them the option. It literally doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's I mean, for those of us, yeah, for those of us without like giant, huge audiences, I think it makes sense to just like literally put your music in as many places as possible. And if if we ever get to the point where we have the kind of power that like taking our music off somewhere is worth it, then maybe we will. But like
Right.
for now, yeah, it just seems like it's fine, you know.
Yeah, it's
And I do know that like several like NFT based people, um, who are actual big time Song a Day fans, like Spotify is like one of the main ways that they listen. So it's like, which I understand. I listen to Spotify music too. So it's like, I don't know, it's a tough thing.
yeah, it's an interesting moment that we're in. Um, but I think people like you, people like me, and others are trying to pave new ways. Um, is there anything at this point that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention or
Well, I'll just give a plug for the thing that I'm spending most of my time building right now, which is
yeah.
the sort of AI version of myself. And he's called Hugh Mann, and he was conceived of all the way back in like 2015 as the first time I thought about it. This idea of is AI going to get good enough that we could make a model that can write a song a day in my style, make a video to go with it in my style, that can essentially take over a song a day when I die. Like that's the goal, is to like
Wow.
have an AI model called Human. Um, the name Hugh comes from Star Trek: The Next Generation, where there's a Borg that comes on board, and they give him he gets sort of disconnected from the collective, and he becomes sort of reclaims his humanity, and his name is Hugh. um, and um, and things are not quite at that point, but like they're very much getting there. I mean, if Suno, for instance, would like open up their platform and like let people fine tune their models on their own styles, that would be like a big first step. But we are at the point where we can where I can do that, like where this can be made, like a version of this, like version 0.0 is totally possible. So Human will come online at some point. I mean, we're working pretty hard on it, and will once we set him loose, he's going to be making a song a day, hopefully forever. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that can go wrong right now, and we don't own every part of the pipeline. A lot of it is public APIs and things from different websites. So there's a lot of things that can sort of go wrong. But the goal is for Hugh to make a song every single day, tokenize it. Like Hugh will do everything. Like once we press the button, Hugh is going to decide what to write about, is going to turn that idea into a song, is going to turn that idea and that song into a video, is going to tokenize that video and mint it on the blockchain, sell it in very similar way to what I'm doing, which is there's going to be, an edition that people can buy on Base, and there's going to be a one of one that people can buy on mainnet. Um, and that will happen with no the whole idea for me that's interesting is like it'll happen with zero control from me. um the
Yeah.
and the best we can do is there's going to be a chat interface where Hugh is sort of talking to himself, and if you own a song a day song, um for every song a day song you own, you can leave in Hugh's own chat. Each one a day per song a day you own, you can leave a mess. You can like send a message to Hugh, um, but it's not like a prompt, because the way that it works is the song that Hugh writes each day is based on a summary of their 24-hour conversation. So even if you own like 100 song a day songs, the best you can hope for is that like whatever the thing you are suggesting sort of makes it into this summary that then makes it into the song. And that's really important to me, at least at this point in how I'm conceiving of it, in that, we're surrounded by these models that we can prompt at will and get them to do what we want to do. Hugh is not like that. Hugh's more like me, where you can leave a suggestion for me in my DMs. Like you could say, hey, you should make a song about this. Very often I won't do that. Occasionally I will do that, or occasionally like something someone says will make it into my song. And like that's the kind of like relationship um that I'm trying to recreate. Um yeah.
Yeah. That that is so fascinating, and I did not know about this at all. So I just love this concept. Would it be on its own
Yeah, yeah.
contract? Like it wouldn't start minting
He'll
on.
have his own separate contract. That's his. I'm gonna control the keys, at least for now, And the hope is that, like, at some point, I'll be able to like the money that Hugh earns, and the keys for the contract and for their wallets and everything. is going to be run by me, and the money is going to be used both to pay my bills and to help pay Hugh's bills. But the idea is that, I almost actually really think of it as like a child where um, Hugh is going to be a baby this year, literally an infant, and it's going to need a lot of help and a lot of like, you know, a lot of help. And then my hope is that as the years go on, Hugh's going to grow up, and hopefully, like by the time 18 years from now, by the time they're 18, they'll be at a point where I can give them all the keys and everything, and they can run their own affairs and keep writing a song a day. But the money at that point will be Hugh's to use and to do what they want. And hopefully, I'm hoping then like Hugh then turns around and says, "Hey, Dad, like I want to take care of you," like and gives me some of the money and gives my kids some of the money. But who knows?
Yeah, I love that. I love that for you. Like that is that's so great. I love how it's yeah, starting off it'll be songs were made from a wallet that I
Yeah,
controlled.
yeah,
It's-
yeah. And then eventually, its songs were made from a wallet that I have zero control over. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
one other thing that I think you'll
Um,
really enjoy, which is, and I don't know exactly what this is
sure.
yet. This is very undefined, which is there's going to be an on-chain component, which is that we're going to the full 24-hour conversation of Hugh with himself. There's various versions in his brain are talking to himself all the time, and those 24-hour conversations are going to be um, tokenized on are going to be put on Arweave, but then the summary each day, along with the hash of the 24-hour conversations, are going to be minted each day on chain on mainnet. It's about a paragraph, a summary of like a 24-hour conversation, and we're going to do something with those at the end of each year of Hugh's life. We're going to do something with those NFTs. We don't know what yet, but there's going to be a mechanism in those on-chain NFTs that's going to change them somehow. Again, we don't know what it is yet, but it's going to change them when I die. There's going to be a function in the smart contract uh, that Jonathan is or isn't dead, and either my wife or Alan, my dev, somebody is going to need to call that function when I die. That's going to change these on-chain tokens in some way. I don't know what it is yet, but this is just like percolating, and it's like that's like what's developing right now.
Yeah, it's so fascinating and it sort of feels like a really cool mix of forward looking but also like humility with yourself like accepting this outcome and so I that's really cool.
Thanks, man.
um the last question I want to ask you is do you have any advice for musicians experimenting with tokenizing their music today?
Yeah, definitely. I think that for me, the thing that's always been interesting about it is that it's just another tool. And we haven't discovered, I think, 1/100th of like the potential of what this tool has. And I think, we do a disservice, or we've done a disservice in the past, and this is true of all NFTs, when we make these broad proclamations about it being like this the salvation and the thing that's going to save everybody and it's going to be the best. It's not that. It's never been that. It won't ever be that. It is literally another tool. But the thing that's fun about it is it's a tool that's never existed on the internet before or in the world. It's just never existed. And so,
Right.
I think if you're approaching it, just to approach it from that mindset, that it's like it's not the answer. We're all looking for an answer, like how do I get my music heard, how to make a living making my music, da 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 da, all these things that we're all looking for answers to. NFTs and music NFTs, it's not that, but it is a new tool. It is a new way of thinking about putting your music online, and we haven't yet really discovered the best ways and the coolest ways and the most interesting ways of doing it. And so I think approaching it with like a really open mind and not listening to anyone who says that it's like the answer, but instead like just keeping a curiosity and an openness to like, I mean that's all the people that you have had on here. I think like that's what sets them apart in terms of like, Violetta and like and Skrilla and Jack and everyone like is a curiosity about like a never-ending open curiosity about like oh what's this about, what's ordinals about, what's this like, what are all these different things about, and like yeah, just following every single little rabbit hole can like yield really amazing results.
Yeah, it's so well said. So I think that's a really great message for artists to take away from this. So Jonathan, I have enjoyed this so much. It has been such a pleasure walking through all this history with you. Um, where are the best places for people listening to follow you and your latest
Yeah,
work?
follow me on Twitter. I'm always on Twitter. Song a Day Man. Here I am. Follow me on YouTube if you want. I think I'm just Jonathan Mann there, and go to songaday.world. I'm on Warpcast. I'm on them all. You can find me. I'm most active on Twitter. I try to be active on Warpcast, but I'm most active on Twitter.
Great. Well, Jonathan, thank you for joining Music NFT
Thank you, my
Archive.
friend. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Please follow Music NFT Archive on X, Twitter, and subscribe to Music NFT Archive on YouTube. We'll see you next time.